Well, I want to thank you all very much for coming today. I really appreciate you being here. And for all the occupational therapists out there, happy OT month. So my name is Brian Hinaman. I am an occupational therapist and an ATP SMS out of the C.W. Bill Young VA Medical Center, which is part of the Bay Pines VA healthcare system based out of Bay Pines, which is actually property that used to be owned by Al Capone back in the day. But we're very, very close to St. Petersburg, Florida. So to start off, just to get an idea of who's in the audience, how many of you are clinicians, OTs, PTs, KTs? Okay, that's quite a bunch. And how about supplier reps? Excellent. Well, thank you all for what you do for us. You really help us be successful in helping our veterans at the VA and our patients across the board. Do we have any rehab engineers? Researchers? Anybody else? And who works for the VA? Awesome. Very good. All right. Well, John and I will be talking to you today about the Wheeled Mobility Telehealth Protocol. We have no conflicts of interest. Two clinicians that work with John up in Richmond are Brian Niedermayer and Jenna Neubauer. And the three of them actually created the original Wheeled Mobility Telehealth Protocol. And then I thought it was fascinating and I jumped on that bandwagon, and John and I have been doing some presentations. We started off last year, we were at the American Occupational Therapy Association conference in San Antonio, where we spoke on this topic for the federal track. So that's what kind of got us started. And here we are at the grand finale of ISS. So we're super excited to be here. So just to kind of get an idea for those of you that are clinicians and provide the evaluations, how many of you have never done a telehealth encounter? All right, perfect. How many are beginners? Maybe 1 to 5 encounters. Okay. And intermediate, 5 to 25. And then how many could be considered advanced, over 25 encounters? Awesome. So there's a pretty good mix. So we hope everybody can find some wonderful tidbits to take away from this and incorporate it into your practice. And then when we're done, if you guys think of some stuff, you're like, gosh, you know, they should really talk about this because I do it and it's amazing. Please reach out and share that with us. At the end of the presentation, we're going to have a slide that's going to have our email addresses. So if you have some stuff you'd like to share with us, please take a screenshot of that slide and get in touch. We would love to get some feedback. So some of our objectives today are to define 3 ways in which telehealth may enhance the wheelchair delivery process, as well as 3 limitations. And understanding 3 ways to improve wheelchair delivery for consumers who are not able to come to the clinic or have great difficulty doing so. Because obviously a lot of people, especially as they get older and have difficulty leaving the house for any reason, or maybe live quite a way, quite far from the healthcare facility, it's a burden to try to make it to a face-to-face appointment. So when we were doing our research and preparing for this, I discovered that one of the earliest and most famous uses of hospital-based telemedicine was in the late 50s and early 60s when they used a closed-circuit TV link between the Nebraska Psychiatric Institute and Norfolk State Hospital for psychiatric consultations. So that was kind of interesting. So COVID. 2020 was just a nightmare for all of us. But as we all know, one of the positive aspects is that we really discovered how effective telemedicine can be in providing healthcare to people across the board. In the VA, we saw the telehealth encounters jump to over 3.8 million in fiscal year 2020, which was an increase of over 1,200% compared to less than 300,000 in fiscal year 2019. And then looking between 2019 and 2021, fiscal year 2021, which was fully submerged in the pandemic, the increase was over 3,100%, 9.5 million encounters. And then I did some research recently. These are all of the VA encounters, and you can see across the bottom, you've got fiscal years 19, 20, 21, 22, and then 23, which we're still in the middle of. So that's why it kind of dropped back down, because it's not full fiscal year encounters yet. Obviously, we're still in the middle, but you can see 19 was really low. 20, it started to creep up, and then it jumped all the way up to the peaks in 21 and 22. Now, the difference between the lines, the blue is the VA Video Connect, VVC appointments. That's what I primarily use for my telehealth encounters. And then the red is other telehealth, and then the green is the combined total. So that was total VA telehealth encounters. This is occupational therapy telehealth encounters. And again, this is across all of the VA. And then VA wheelchair and advanced mobility clinic telehealth encounters. So you can see across the board, it's just been an astronomical jump due to the pandemic. So this was a little slide that I borrowed from somebody else who had a presentation, and she was talking about the different types of telehealth. Over here, you can see the VVC is the purple in the middle. And then you've got other VVC, other telehealth. And then the biggest amount of modality encounters was telephone, which is the red at the bottom. But you can see in fiscal year 2020, how the VVC encounters really started to take off. So the 37th ISS was the one that was originally scheduled in 2021. After a couple postponements, it was all virtual in January of last year. And I got in touch with Rich Shane, who he's one of the 8 people that puts on ISS that Mark Schmaler was talking about yesterday. And he got some information for me about telehealth at ISS. My first ISS in 2017 in Nashville, there were no presentations that talked about telehealth. And then the last one in Pittsburgh, 2019, there was only one. But the virtual ISS last year, there were 9 presentations on telehealth. So it's really picked up for sure. So here, John's going to take over and talk a little bit about the RESNA wheelchair service delivery model and how we incorporate the overall delivery model for wheelchair evaluations and incorporate that into our telehealth protocol.
So good afternoon, everybody. So for some of the room, you're going to have to wake up from the lunch kind of drowsies. And some of the room is just going to have to wake up. So yeah, good to be in Pittsburgh. Pretty fun times at the ISS, and it's really great to network and see so many people, so many great stakeholders in this industry. So I was at the ISS in 2019, and I attended the one presentation on telehealth, and I was skeptical. And I was like, I don't see how this, I don't think there's a place for this. Or I didn't quite kind of see how it worked yet. And next year, 2020, the pandemic, we all of a sudden do like a 180 from doing primarily face-to-face visits to, I think in most places, we're doing primarily telemedicine with really not a roadmap or any sort of guide to do it. So what this protocol is a blueprint that we created in Richmond. I know that throughout the country, people were creating protocols and have had success doing it. So we're not here to like say, this is how you do it. This is one way to do it, and one way that we figured out how to like try to go through the system. And while it may be challenging to do every component of like a wheelchair service delivery through telehealth, we definitely have found that like certain aspects of it are enhanced by telehealth, and it's become a great tool to have in our shed, to have in our box. And so want to talk about that. The VA has done some really good stuff with creating protocols for clinic to clinic telehealth, especially with contract nursing homes. There've been a lot of innovative ways created throughout the system. But again, me and Jenna and Brian were sitting there and scratching our heads. What are we going to do? How do we do this? So we sort of created a decision tree and a step-by-step algorithm that even someone who is relatively new to the wheelchair game, and I say this all with a grain of salt because it does take a lot of experience from a clinician to effectively conduct telehealth. But back in the day, we were all trying to learn this out. So Brian and Jen and myself, we kind of base it off the RESNA service delivery model up here, which is the gold standard, I would say, and how we try to follow all these steps. We got referrals, assessments, equipment recommendation and selection. Funding and procurement is different for the VA system. So we're also, have to qualify, we're talking about the VA healthcare system. We do not have to fight for funding and do letters of medical necessity to the extent or any degree that folks have to do outside our system. I really recognize that. So we are we're lucky in that aspect, I would think. And you're going to see where this leads to with our protocol. So we actually trimmed it down to 5 steps with the catchy acronym SEDF. Right. Okay. So like screening, that's still a great way for telehealth. Like we get a consult, the veteran lives, 60 miles away. Hey, maybe we should offer them telehealth. Like when we accept consults at the VA, we can offer them face-to-face. We can offer them clinic-to-clinic telehealth, which is underutilized in my opinion, and clinic-to-home telehealth. So if they're living, more than 50, 60 miles away, I will receive my consults and offer them that choice. That way we can kind of help decide, do you need to come to clinic? Can you come to clinic, right? And if not, how are we going to get out and help you out? So you got your screening, evaluation, device trial, delivery of the equipment, and follow-up. This gives a little bit more detail on how you might categorize some of the things that you're doing for that. The functional mobility assessment, again, created by our sponsors and our hosts here, can be conducted as a pre and post test through telehealth. Great way to do the outcome measurements. I do also want to acknowledge, while I brought up our host, that Pittsburgh has also done a ton of research and has an online course on telemedicine. It's really good. I consider it sort of the ideal way to do it, but it might be very difficult to actually do it. But telehealth as a tool, especially for device trial, we get into the environment where the product's going to be used. So we get to see, instead of being in clinic and being like, well, I think that'll be fine. Yeah, the midwheel is going to be good for you. We're actually seeing the environment. This is client-centered. It's good practice. And it's a great way to go. So when we presented the protocol previously, we actually left out the protocol itself. So people were like, that's pretty cool. You're talking about this protocol, but where's the protocol? So we thought we'd include a few slides that kind of showed the decision process. And again, I'm going to give it up to Brian and Jenna for doing the detail work on this stuff. So, and again, people might format it to what works for your system, but you sort of have an algorithm. This one would be for device trial day, Well, that's a great question. So, well, we would arrange that in our system as we're speak on, we lean on, and we are, for right now, we have great relationships with our trusted supplier reps. So how we, please. Well, it could be multiple. It could be just one. So you could use just one or more of the steps. You kind of would incorporate the tool as you need it to work for you. But for doing the device trial date, for instance, I might call someone like Phil Vaughn from Quantum or Randy from Permaville and be like, hey guys, let's look at our schedule and see what works out with us and the veteran. Can you do May 5th at 10 o'clock? Is the veteran going to be home? Okay. So, hey, we're looking at trial on this device. So we set it up like that, and we'll discuss that as well, because the supplier reps are a really important part of this. This is an iterative process. So it's constantly changing and evolving, but you know, truly working with them, and communication is a key. And kind of did an informal survey with supplier reps a few weeks ago in my clinic. We were all sitting around kind of talking what was working and what was not with telehealth. And a big thing that we were getting from the supplier reps was maybe a lack of consistency between clinicians, lack of communication. They could stand for more direction. Safety was even brought up as a concern, but so. Absolutely. Welcome. Brian, want this?
Probably a good idea. So as John kind of insinuated, you could use telehealth for maybe just one of the components or more, kind of depending on how things go. One of the most important factors to consider is patient preference. You know, some veterans actually would rather come to the VA, especially if they already have other appointments scheduled. And so, you know, if they've got other appointments scheduled, they'd rather just knock everything out in one day instead of having you come on another day. Even though it's super convenient, if they're already at the VA, it just makes more sense for them to take care of it there. Again, available technology. Most of my VVC appointments are done with the supplier reps, and so we're using their technology, and that's a nice little feature that I get to tell them, because every VVC appointment that's scheduled, an email is sent out to the veterans that basically wants to ensure that they understand how to use their phone, tablet, computer, whatever, to be able to connect to the video appointment. But since I'm not connecting with the veteran with their equipment and I'm connected with the supplier rep, I have to kind of tell them, you can disregard the email that I have no control over, but it's coming automatically anyway. So that's kind of how the technology aspect works for me. But sometimes I've done VVC appointments with veterans who maybe they don't need anything high level. They don't need CRT chairs. They just need a, you know, maybe a transport wheelchair or a standard manual wheelchair that they're going to use once or twice a month or something like that. And then I will do a VVC appointment directly with the veterans and their family or caregivers. So that's where technology can be a little bit tricky, and, you know, might spend more time on the phone getting it set up than I actually do on the video appointment to finish up. But the bottom line is you want to maximize your outcomes, you know, whether you're using telehealth face-to-face or a mixture. The goal is to maximize your outcomes and get the best results for the veterans and your patients. So what if you do stuff and then this doesn't fit into the protocol that we're presenting? Don't worry about it. It doesn't have to fit. It's just kind of a blueprint, something to help people that are new to the game get an idea of what they can do to get started. Maybe you've done a few and you're having difficulties with certain aspects. Maybe you can find some stuff to help. And then, of course, those of you that have done a lot, maybe you do it a completely different way. It doesn't matter. It's okay. Like John said, we're not trying to tell you this is how to do it. We're just giving you an idea of what's working really well for us. And again, I mentioned before, if you can find better ways to do it, let us know. We would love to know about that. So how many people are involved in these? It depends on the veteran's functional abilities and whether or not you have somebody at the veteran's home helping. Again, the most successful arrangement for John and myself is to have a trusted supplier rep who, most of those are ATPs. So that's great because it gets that extra level of knowledge. Having them at the veteran's home, and that's who we connect with, that's the most successful way. The VA clinician will obviously be guiding the evaluation and determining everything that's appropriate and necessary. And the supplier reps, obviously, they're the experts on their equipment. And so they can help kind of give us ideas about what options are best based on the veteran's needs and their home environment. It's really awesome because, you know, if I've got a supplier rep for a manual wheelchair company, you know, they will always bring a folding chair and a rigid chair, because obviously those chairs are great for their own reasons in different situations. And by having both of those available, the veterans can try them out in their home environment and see what works best. And then we can use that chair to kind of help guide our measurements. You know, it's great to have somebody sitting in a chair and you go through taking all your measurements, but if they're sitting in a wheelchair, it's that much easier. So getting through the doors, if they have a threshold step at the house. I mean, I've seen everything from 1.5 inches to an 8-inch threshold step. So it depends on how big of a step they have, whether or not we need to look at getting them a ramp. And I live in Florida. The world's location for all golf carts and mobile homes. So and Burmese pythons too, yeah. But the problem with mobile homes is they usually have, 2, 3, 4 steps. You're not going to get a ramp in most of those locations because it's just got to be too long. Remember, the VA can only provide ADA compliant ramps. So for every 1 inch of elevation, the ramp's going to be a foot long. So if you have a 6-inch threshold step, that's a 6-foot long ramp. 3 steps, forget about it. So we do a lot of vertical platform lifts, the VPLs, which is like the little elevator they put on the side of the steps to help the veterans get their wheelchairs in and out of their home. Oops. What if you don't have local vendors? This is a true limitation for telehealth, especially when you're talking about the device trial component. If you don't have local vendors, if you're in a very rural location and you don't have anybody that's available to bring devices to the veteran's home to trial, then it's pretty impossible to get device trial taken care of. But as far as getting through the process of being able to take measurements and discuss options related to the wheelchair, if you have family and caregivers present, at least 2 are the most successful, so that you can have one holding the camera in a way to where they can get all of the veteran in the picture while you provide instructions to the other family member or caregiver there for how to measure width, depth, stuff like that. One of the most important things that sometimes you can forget about when measuring the width on a wheelchair, that people that don't do this wouldn't think about. If they have like a cloth tape, for sewing, they're going to put it on the side of the hip and stretch it over to the other side of the hip, right? Well, that's an actual arc that is going to be a couple inches longer than the true width. So trying to specify exactly how to take those measurements is very critical. So which rep do I use for my VVC visits? Who's going to go to the veterans' homes to help me out? The best advice I can give you is to kind of follow the same thought process that you would use in deciding which reps will help you for your face-to-face appointments. Which reps are going to provide the most help to your veterans and your clients, going to provide the best support to you, and who's willing to work with you and go to the veterans' homes. I have one who refuses to go to the veterans' homes, and I have been giving 3, 4, and 5 different excuses because the story keeps changing when I contradict the first excuse with factual information that that's not true. And so the story changes, and bottom line is they're not willing to go. So I obviously am not going to use them, and we're going to go other routes. So the bottom line, who's willing to work with you and go to the veterans' homes, and who's going to help you out the most? So some of the benefits of telehealth for wheeled mobility evaluations. It can provide access for rehab services and specialists and prevent unnecessary delays. One of the key aspects to this is many times you can schedule an appointment in a veteran's home where they don't have to leave a lot sooner than if they have to make arrangements for travel, especially those veterans that don't drive anymore. When a veteran doesn't drive and maybe their spouse works, then they have to get another family member or maybe paid transportation services involved, and that could delay the ability to schedule that evaluation several days or even a couple of weeks. So doing some telehealth can oftentimes get those appointments scheduled a lot sooner. But the best thing that the veterans love the most is that they don't have to travel. I mean, who doesn't want to stay home, right? You're in your own home, your comfortable home, your couch, just hanging out. You don't have to drive and waste all the time that it takes you to get there, the time that you're waiting after you arrive until you're actually called in for your appointment. You're not spending any money on gas, tolls, wear and tear on your car, any of that stuff. So that benefit to the veteran is immeasurable, and they love it. Plus, like John and I talked about, just being in their natural environment, you get to see a lot more influences on the equipment you're wanting to provide that you can't do in your clinic with the 8 or 10 foot wide halls on a linoleum floor where you can navigate everywhere with no problem. But in their home, it gives you the real idea of how it's going to work for them. But another benefit to us as clinicians is productivity. The productivity for VVC appointments, I started doing these before the pandemic, but it really kicked off. And when the pandemic hit, our VA was kind of closing down all of the non-urgent outpatient appointments. And so I did VVC appointments 5 days a week for 3 months, from March to June 2020. And when things were getting back to normal, I was really crossing my fingers that I would get to keep doing it at least 1 day a week. But it was so successful that I have been doing it 2 days a week since June of 2020. So for almost 3 years, I've been doing telehealth 2 days a week. And I think in all of those appointments for the last 3+ years, I've had 5 total cancellations or no-shows. I probably had 5 cancellations and no-shows in my face-to-face appointments the last 2 weeks. So the productivity, it's astronomical that as well. Challenges and barriers, obviously scheduling challenges. I can't let our scheduling department for the VA, it's called HAS, our Health Administrative Services, where our MSAs typically schedule all appointments. I can't do that with my VVC appointments because they're not just scheduling an appointment that's convenient for the veteran in my clinic. I also have to schedule with my supplier reps. So I get to coordinate 3 schedules for every appointment. So that can be a bit of a challenge. Wireless signal and internet connectivity. So I touched on how the technology barriers are minimized because I use the supplier reps. That's true because they know how to use their phones. But if the veteran doesn't have Wi-Fi access at their home and my supplier reps got 1 bar, it's kind of tough to get an effective video appointment. A lot of times we'll get blacked out, we'll freeze. Sometimes we just flip to a phone call. Those veterans that have home health aides, if they are dependent on care and it's not a family member, they have a home health aide who cancels that day. And who knows, the veteran might not even be able to call you and let you know. So your supplier rep shows up, knocking and knocking and knocking, he doesn't answer. And then you get a call later that day or the next day from a family member saying, I'm so sorry, his aide canceled. We didn't have any choice. Sometimes the veteran is still in bed, and so that takes some extra time too. And then the carryover of training with family and caregivers. It's great to have veterans sitting in the equipment, whether it's a power wheelchair, manual wheelchair, go through the motions, do a lot of training. But when I do face-to-face clinic appointments and I bring them back for a final fitting and training appointment, I can rehash all of that training and, provide maybe some written handouts and stuff like that to help with that. Whereas with telehealth, that becomes a little bit more of a barrier too. So some takeaways, again, many cases won't fit neatly into our protocol. Don't worry about it. It's just a blueprint, just to give you some ideas. But telehealth does enable us to accommodate unusual situations. It reduces travel time, especially, you can knock out 2 or 3 components in just 1 visit. Again, you've got access to their home, their vehicle, if you're needing to think about a vehicle lift, and other, mobility related IADLs. Again, for us, the trusted industry partners, our supplier reps are crucial to our model. Increased overall satisfaction to be determined in the long run, but I can tell you right now that, I have never had a veteran that was frustrated that we had somebody come to their house to take care of an evaluation and then had their chair delivered at a later date and had those reps come back to do some, final fitting if needed. They love not having to come to the VA if they don't have to. So again, be buoyed by the protocol, but don't be bound by it. We're going to talk about a few different case studies. So this first case study, the title didn't show up on this slide, but this is about the driveway. So John's going to talk about this.
Before I jump into the case study, I do want to talk about a couple of other things. There's been research put into it by credible groups such as the Clinicians Task Force, as well as the University of Pittsburgh, that suggests that the best use of telehealth for wheelchair service delivery is a hybrid model where we're doing both face-to-face in clinic and then also telehealth. So it would be really challenging to pull all this off. Again, Brian pointed out some of the challenges with getting measurements from people who are not clinicians. Certainly can be super challenging. And then also addressing okay, so you have to go to a phone call. Well, what are we going to do with that? Well, telehealth is, again, it's an iterative process. Within the VA system, we're now encouraging store and forward telehealth in addition. So you might be able to communicate really well with your team who's able to go out in the field and then tell them exactly what you want for them to film of the evaluation or the trial. So that might be a way around, the lack of like the Wi-Fi signal in that area. I'm working with the VHA Innovators Network because I was stymied by what I felt were the limitations of telehealth when I first got into it. I don't worry so much about its limitations anymore because it's an effective tool. I mean, we don't use tools for everything. We use the tools for the job, the right tool for the right job. So this is a great tool to have that we weren't really using before. It's definitely client-centered. And I think if we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, if we're able to get out to people who aren't able to come into the facility, then we're also promoting that. So far, the first 2 days here, I've like gathered these nuggets from the sessions that I've been at, and it's like, yeah, I feel like how this all relates, like building the consensus amongst the team, working with the supplier reps, the family, the clinicians to move on this stuff. And so I think there's so many different principles that get brought up and have been discussed that, so there we are with the telehealth. So this is an example of a hybrid model, and this is done by Jenna, who is a spinal cord injury specialist, and she's also on our adaptive sports equipment clinic in Richmond. So this is an example of a fellow who was in clinic, had been inpatient, and so the staff worked with the veteran, was able to kind of know what he was up to and his abilities. And the problem was in his case that his caregiver could not come in for training as well, and had technology limitations as discussed. So in this case, I do believe that our trusted supplier rep may be in this room who facilitated this appointment. And this was a case where if we had just been working in clinic and tried a couple of models, we might have been leaning towards a certain device and a certain drive system. And the fact that they were able to test it out in someone's environment, it was kind of cool to see what really happened. So a vendor was selected. In this case, it was Permaville. We work with many different companies, but props to Permaville. Thank you so much. And so the clinician and the rep went to the house and took a mid-wheel drive and a front-wheel drive out. This was during COVID, and protocols were followed. So veterans' goals were to be able to get outside and to be able to go through his driveway as well as his house. So with that in mind, a front-wheel drive, probably going to be that front-wheel drive, right? And also brought out a second chair, mid-wheel drive with the aggressive tread casters. Lo and behold, only one chair worked. The winning chair was then taken through the house. And the VA clinician and vendor completed the family training, and it turned out to be, so the chair actually turned out to be the mid-wheel drive with aggressive casters. And again, clinically, we might be thinking, hey, front wheel or rear wheel drive is going to be more of that like outside type chair. So this is a great example of we got to the environment. And I think the supplier rep may even have done some programming changes there on the spot in communication with the clinician and able to make the device work for him and the veteran. Success story. This next one, this is related to adaptive sports equipment clinic. So in the VA system, again, veterans, so we're certainly trying to do a chair or power wheelchair that meets all your needs. I mean, that's what our goal would be, to a chair that can work inside and outside for you and meet all your goals. But in cases where it doesn't, and the veteran has appropriate recreational goals, okay, and in this case, it's a great example of being client-centered, because this is a instrumental activity of daily living. The veteran was no longer able to tend to his horses. So he's getting stuck in the dirt with his regular power chair. Of course, we're all familiar with that. So an initial, again, another example of a hybrid appointment. The initial eval was completed at the VA. And so again, there was no problems with his current chair with getting around inside the house. Veteran brought photos of his property. This is somewhat dated, even that I'm saying that, because with store and forward telehealth, we're now able to have them send video to us and we can upload it right on their chart. And it's in the system and it's relatively new. I do wheel mobility. It's almost the only thing I do, maybe to a fault. And I have just started dabbling with the store and forward telehealth, and I think it is really cool to be able to go in the chart and then follow the link, and you can pull up the video of the property. You have it right then and there, the evidence that they need a chair that a chair that's set up differently wouldn't be able to handle that situation. In this case, I believe that 2 chairs, this was probably Frontier V6 and an X8 were taken out to the property. And I think the veteran trialed the X8, the Extreme X8 is a 4-wheel drive power wheelchair. It's really just meant to be used outside. I mean, you can use it inside, but it's got really high profile tires. It's going to pick everything up. And so he decided to just go with that chair and didn't even want to try the other chair. He demonstrated his ability to meet his goal. So telehealth helped, find the right product to meet his pet management goal, improve his quality of life. Follow-up call was placed 6 weeks later, and he reported continued satisfaction. And that is another area, again, one component of the protocol where you can follow up and you could do your post-outcome measurement like a post-FMA.
X8 chair, that's an awesome chair for outside. But what if it wouldn't have worked in his home? Would you have provided him a different chair for his home use?
Whoa. Sorry. Yes, but in this case, he had a chair already that was working inside. If he didn't, we would want to probably address that first. But you are absolutely right. So no, the first step is to make sure that he's got a device that would allow him to meet his activities of daily living inside the house and to get to medical appointments and all that good stuff. Again, it's sort of a nice advantage of the VA system that we can provide to qualified veterans, the enhanced power mobility devices and the so-called all-terrain chairs.
So I had a situation a couple of years ago where I had a consult that was coming through and it had a comment added that the veteran didn't want to schedule an appointment because he just wanted the power wheel or a power scooter shipped to him. So I called him up. He was a 97-year-old World War II veteran. And he met the criteria for power mobility. He was oxygen, he had COPD, dependent on oxygen. And he and his 95-year-old wife did not drive. They lived 48 miles away from a VA facility, which that's an hour drive each way. So we scheduled a VA Video Connect appointment. I had a manufacturer representative, a supplier rep go with me to the veteran's home with some demo equipment. And this is a big veteran. He was 6'6", 240 pounds. He had a 20-inch wide standard off-the-shelf Invacare Tracer wheelchair, manual wheelchair, that he used for 3 or 4 years for all mobility around his house. That's primarily where he stayed. They didn't travel much at all. He also had a transport chair that they would take in their Chevy Suburban that somebody else would drive. He needed a big vehicle. He was a big guy. He wasn't going to be getting around a little Chevy Spark, that's for sure. So he was introduced to power wheelchair because he was using it for household mobility. I explained to him that the scooter is what most people think of, but his needs would be for a power wheelchair. He got so frustrated. He's like, I don't want that thing. I think that would be great for someone younger than me and more active than me, but I just sit around all day. I don't even go out around the neighborhood. I'll be fine with just getting a better one of these. And he kind of tapped the armrest of the manual wheelchair he was sitting in. Well, my supplier rep was actually a rep for manual and power chair companies. So he also had some equipment for a custom ultra lightweight manual wheelchair. So I was able to switch the focus of the evaluation from power mobility to a custom manual wheelchair. And he already had a ramp for the garage entrance of the home. And obviously the Chevy Suburban would be perfect for transporting that. So as we started talking about the wheelchair, the differences between the one that we would be able to provide, the one that he was so excited. He didn't even want to try the one that we had available for him to use in his home. So we took some measurements, discussed different specifications. We got him a carbon fiber ultra lightweight manual wheelchair with an oxygen tank holder, just in case he did want to leave the house sometime. And obviously configured the seat height for him to be able to use his feet to self-propel, because that's what he was doing with the Tracer. We got some specialized hand rims, and he was thrilled to have a manual wheelchair that fit him perfectly, because his 20-inch wide chair, I mean, he was a big guy, but he still didn't need a 20-inch wide. He fit better in an 18-inch wide. And I followed up with him, and he was so excited with how easy it was to propel and get around the house. And he even said he was going to take it for a stroll around the neighborhood, which he never did that with his old chair. So that was a pretty fun case study. All right, so telehealth doesn't work for everybody. And even if the veteran is motivated to use it and you think it'll work, sometimes you have extraneous influences that prevent that from being successful, like a family member. So my supply rep showed up, and the veteran had a son who yelled, cursed, and got angry with the supply rep for being at his house without telling him first. Tried to explain to him, well, sir, we weren't coming to see you, and we scheduled this appointment with your father, and that's who we're coming to see. So I'm sorry that the two of you don't talk. But anyway, well, after we got into discussing this and the son went off and pitched a fit in the back of the house, the veteran kind of divulged that they were going to be evicted soon. And their next residential setting had not been established yet. They didn't really know what they were going to do. So I don't think there's any question I could have asked during my telephone call to schedule that appointment that would have led me to glean this information from him, that his son is a jerk and he's about to be evicted. So there was just really no way I could predict that this mess was about to happen. So I wasted my supplier rep's time. I was so sorry, but they're super cool. Even when that happens, or they don't show up sometimes. I've never had a problem with that. But due to those limitations, obviously when you're looking at a power mobility device, you kind of need to know what your home environment is. I mean, if you're going to be in a second floor apartment with no elevator access, you're limited with that. So we terminated the evaluation at that point in time. And I asked the veteran to contact me after he had his new residential setting established, and I never heard from him again. Wasn't upset about that though. His son was such a jerk, I'll tell you what. Well, it was a little bit more of an issue than that. It wasn't really neglect or, elder abuse or, exploitation or anything like that. The veteran, I mean, it was a HUD-VASH apartment, and the veteran's son was unemployed and, basically just kind of creating havoc in the neighborhood, so to speak. And that was more or less why they were evicted. It wasn't anything to do with the care that his dad got. I mean, he was in good shape. He wasn't malnourished or, disgustingly filthy smelling of urine or feces or anything like that. It was just kind of a loud, boisterous, obnoxious son that got him kicked out. All right, so John's going to talk a little bit about his Spark Seed Innovator Challenge he talked about.
Thanks, Brian. So yeah, I mentioned a little while ago how I had been stymied by the limitations of telehealth, and it actually prompted me to create this challenge idea for the VA Spark Seed Spread Accelerator Program for the Innovators Network. And my challenge idea was, how can the VA improve or optimize seating and positioning and wheeled mobility evaluations, interventions, and outcomes for veterans who are not able to come into the VA Medical Center or have great difficulty doing so. So I'm in the process of working on that. And again, telehealth is definitely part of it. Telehealth is part of the tool. Storing forward telehealth is part of the tool. Around the country, and I'm going to say something you guys have heard, if you've been to one VA facility, you've been to one VA medical center. So we tend to do things a little bit uniquely everywhere where we are. But there are OT mobility programs that were set up in Northern Indiana, now in San Francisco. I think Seattle has one that's run under prosthetics. So my VA medical center in Richmond is a hub VA, and we have CBOCs, or like smaller VAs that are spokes to the hub. There's no OTs at these facilities. There's one facility now in Fredericksburg, that's within an hour of Richmond, for those of you not familiar with Virginia. That facility started to have physical therapists, but the rest of the CBOCs do not have clinicians. So they go there and they see the doctors, and then they're sending them to Richmond for wheel mobility and DME evaluations. So, you know, one step is at least getting us to be able to go out to the CBOCs and set up a clinic there. Taking it further, if the veterans can't come into the CBOC, then that might trigger an algorithm where we can get out to their homes. Again, this is within the VA system, and anything is possible, though not easily so. So, you know, acknowledging all this. So this is a work in progress. Up in Minneapolis, Tad Nielsen, an OT, he really set a great precedent with creating the contract nursing home protocol for video clinic to clinic telehealth, but he also got a grant to create what he calls the magic bus. And that would enable us to, you know, load our equipment and devices into the bus and go out, you know, ideally to the person's house and conduct our evaluations and training, and not have to depend on supplier reps, because it's a, you know, it's a beautiful thing, this relationship that we have, but we don't want to abuse it. We also need to, you know, continue to have the clinical input. So there's a lot of different things out there. Big work in progress. I'm grateful to be part of this system where we do have the resources to try to help, and we do have the encouragement to try to think about new ideas. But maybe the takeaway would be that telehealth is a great new tool to have, and a hybrid model of face-to-face and telehealth seems to be the optimal way to do it, but there are ways to do every facet of the wheelchair service delivery model remotely and through telehealth. And in cases like Brian brought up before, where someone's in a remote location and there are no local vendors, well, that's another challenge for us to figure out. I mean, maybe we have an integrated network. Maybe we working with the supplier reps and the companies to figure out what to do in these exceptional cases where we aren't able to communicate them with telehealth. Maybe there's a way to get out there and make it all happen. Rue from Vaco put that one in there. So anyway, it's taken a pandemic to really embrace telehealth for seating and mobility. Questions?
So this is probably a question for like not the VA, but are there I mean, just in this room, like I right. You're lucky. You're very lucky. What programs do you guys use to do telehealth that are HIPAA compliant? Like, are there some favorites in the room? Right, not for you.
I don't know the answer to that. Does anybody have anything to share for her? Anybody else that uses HIPAA compliant? Correct. I mean, that's most successful. Yeah. Yes, sir. That's my home state. Go Colorado. Littleton. Okay. Dare I say you've dug your own hole? By that, I mean having ATPs that are also clinicians and able to do mat evaluations has opened that door. Because I am very cautious to not ask more than should be expected of my ATPs. Like when it gets to power mobility, I don't expect them to be able to conduct a safety evaluation to make sure that they can safely operate a power mobility device. That's not their job. That's not what they're supposed to do. And same thing with the mat evaluation. That's not something that I would burden them with because that's not appropriate. So in your situation, it is definitely a unique problem.
Do you want to respond? Oh my God, I love that.
They just are afraid to participate, and that is rare because they don't know a lot about it. And they're like, okay, I'm not educated on it, this freaks me out. So the easy way out is to say, telehealth keeps me at a distance. So I think education, like being more educated about it, gets you way more comfortable, and maybe that, unless they're like experienced and just
90% of our marketing.
Yeah, but I think on top of it, they have a license, so they're in a full, like, and I don't know if there's like a Canadian where we don't have ATPs, and so that license is. ATPs is a great thing, we need them in Canada, we need that to be held accountable, but because I've spent most of my career in the States now, the one benefit is that license is always held at that higher regard, and it needs to be from the healthcare standpoint. And they might need to be reminded of that. The fact that in the US, we do have ATPs and they're so well educated because of that system. I think from a therapy standpoint, because we have to be experts under that license on so many other things, it is easy to say, well, you are an expert in feeding as well, so maybe I'll default to you, because I also have to be the expert in as an OT, every other ADL and possible thing that would fall into that client as well, depending on how you're working. So I think it's maybe more of an upfront conversation about how you would like to work as a team. And you can both come to the table with your expectations and kind of just hash it out on how you want to work together for the rest of your career. There's not a moment. Those therapists are going to be there for the next 20 or 30 years, and your business is going to be there for that time longer too. And just, I say there it is, and get on the table, remind them of the role that they bring, and why you did it, and remind them of the support that you can have and how it actually works best together, not individual.
And another thing that you can incorporate to that.
We've been using that validation, but that is we did when I got into the hybrid system. For the therapist, or for the two things like an app validation, and you have to be in the clinic. Because a NAV evaluation is if you are thinking there are non-corrective deformities, the skin breakdown, the skeletal, it's like it's a massive static spitter that you cannot move in a house. Then those evaluations we said these have to go beyond the telehome. We have to see them in the clinic. So you should not have a discussion with a therapist to refusing a MAD validation, but probably a therapist would have to say, this is not appropriate to do this over telehealth, because you have to have other issues, serious issues that you have to evaluate on the map, lay our hands on the clients. The other 70%, you can have like a dynamic sitter who can do like their own printers and can stand up and they can different go chairs,
and they don't have a special seating system. Those clients probably don't need a math evaluation because you can do range of motion by just have them stand up and how they move. So you really have, in my 20 years, a very small portion where I really needed to do an in-depth evaluation for a custom mold, for a custom seating, looking at pressure force, looking at spinal deformity. But that should be your minority. And in those cases, I cannot see any therapist who would say, no, I'm not looking at that side. And I think that is where conversation and the clinical practice has to go. When a therapist needs to know when to step in with the math evaluation.
I just want to say those are two like excellent comments. We do have like just a couple minutes left, and I know we've got two questions. So you first.
I agree and disagree with some things, we're all gonna have our own opinions. I've had a handful of clients since COVID, and actually a separate question I have maybe for later is, do any of us know when the non-VA payer sources may change this as the world opens back up, and are we gonna start to be more limited? But anyway, so going back to this piece, I've had cases where I personally, and it's my own opinion, believe that there is more value to a Mad-Eval in a lot of other cases, because you might find subtle possible things and it helps figure out, what I'm noticing. And I'm personally somebody that is a fan or prefer clinic sessions for that reason. I'm a therapist, I'm a clinician. But with COVID, an example of a caseload that I've seen a lot of remote evals because I've had to, they couldn't get to me, were advanced ALS patients or rapidly progressing ALS patients. I'm fortunate to have a couple of vendors or suppliers that I've worked very closely with that are very knowledge-based. Our struggle was trying to make sure that I was seeing what I needed to see. So I was remote. The vendor was at the house, but we came up with certain systems. For example, and I had to document under this therapist direction, this so I didn't get denial. But things like, okay, show me how much. I'm going to use my ALS patient as an example. Show me how much range you can get. Let me see. Okay, now go this way. Like, so I'm directing the clinician, the vendor on moving certain ways. If the client doesn't have the ability to do it actively, I'm not going to try to get them from the bed to the chair or to do a formalized hospital assessment lying down. The ALS clients, more often than not, they're sitting in a recliner a lot of times when I'm seeing them. And but I'll even say, put the camera this way, put your hand here, and I'll try to. I have to make up for what I can't do with my hands. And like, for example, even muscle strength, I can't put a 5 out of 5, but the vendor will have a 5-pound cuff weight in his bag of tricks. So if they've got full active range, we'll then say, okay, can you hold this and lift it up? So we'll try to come up with ways to see what we need to see without my hands being on the person. I don't think it's ideal, but it's been a good way to try to bridge that gap in certain situations.